There are mowers sitting on pallets in every big box store in America right now that were engineered to run about 200 hours and then be carried to the curb. And in the next half hour, I'm going to name the tiers they live in, show you the paperwork that proves the intended service life, walk you through the parts that get left out to hit a price, and hand you a 5-minute test you can run standing in the aisle before you spend $1. Here's what that looks like on a bench. Push mower, 3 seasons old, 1 owner, oil never overfilled, air filter clean. No compression at all. Pull the head and the bore is scored and a ring is broken and the block is aluminum with a hard coating on the wall, which means you cannot hone it and you cannot bore it. The coating wears off at about the same rate the rings do. You can't overbore the block, and honing just takes off more coating. So the repair isn't a repair. It's a new short block or a new mower. That exact failure shows up in service records on 18-month-old machines that were babied. And the owner's own note in one of those cases was that the mower had been used a single season. The cylinder was scored, a ring was gone, and the guarantee ran 1 year. I've had a lot of these apart. Enough to know that the difference between a mower that lasts 15 years and one that lasts 2 is almost never the name on the deck. It's a spec sheet somebody signed off on in a conference room, and there are numbers stamped right on the machine that tell you which one you're holding. 3 things to watch for as we go. Item 4 is the mower, where a replacement handle tube took the owner 1 to 2 months to get, from a company whose phone line is a coin flip on whether a human ever picks up. Item 6 is the platform that got discontinued out from under the people who bought into it, and what a battery costs when the company that made it has moved on. And item 9 has a part inside it that the manufacturer's own customer literature tells you not to service, while that same manufacturer publishes the interval at which it should be serviced. That contradiction is the most expensive sentence in this whole video, and I'm saving it. Let's start with the thing almost everybody gets wrong. The brand name on a mower deck stopped meaning a factory a long time ago. It means a price point and a shelf position. The cleanest proof I know of is a recall notice, not a marketing brochure. In late 2016, one company recalled walk-behind mowers over a control bar that could let the engine and blade keep running when they should have stopped, and the notice covered about 235,000 units sold under Husqvarna, Poulan Pro, Jonsered, Craftsman, Yardworks, Murray, and Brute badges, all of them with the same Briggs & Stratton 7.25 horsepower engine. 7 names, 1 mower, 1 defect, 1 phone number. So when somebody tells you brand X is junk and brand Y is bulletproof, they're usually describing 2 shelves in the same warehouse. What actually varies is the tier, how thick the deck steel is, whether the wheels ride on bushings or bearings, whether the drive gears are steel or nylon, whether the sump has a drain plug, whether the engine block has an iron liner, and whether the parts diagram lists individual components or one big assembly. That's the comparison I'm running the whole way through this list. The way they used to build these to be opened up against the way they now build them to be replaced. 1. The value badges, Yard Machines, Bolens, and the bottom 2 shelves of anything wearing a familiar name. These are the entry-level lines of the old MTD family, and the corporate history matters here more than the mower does. Stanley Black and Decker bought the remaining 80% of MTD holdings in 2021 for $1.6 billion in cash, having taken a 20% stake in 2019. Now read what the buyer told its own investors about why the deal was attractive. MTD had improved its EBITDA margin from 4.5% in 2018 to high single digits, with runway for further improvement to the mid-teens over the next 4 years. I'm not going to pretend that's a scandal. It's a business doing what businesses do. But understand what tripling a margin on a $200 mower actually requires at the factory. There is no magic. It's a thinner deck, a cheaper wheel, a nylon gear where a sintered steel one used to go, a fastener count reduced by 11, and a bushing that is molded into the part so the part becomes the wear item. Every one of those decisions is invisible on the sales floor, and every one of them arrives at your house in year 3. The tell on this tier is the parts diagram. Look up the exploded view before you buy, and see if the front wheel is a wheel, or if the front wheel is a wheel and height adjuster and bracket, sold as one part for 1/3 of what you paid for the mower. 2. Troy-Bilt walk-behinds and lawn tractors, at the price where people expect middle-class quality. Troy-Bilt is the brand that frustrates me most, because the reputation it's spending was earned by tillers built in a different century by a different company. Today it sits mid-shelf, and the owner feedback is rough. On one consumer review site, Troy-Bilt musters 1.1 out of 5 across about 600 reviews, with dozens of one-star entries citing return policies, customer service, repeat failures, and hard starting. Meanwhile, the lab test picture is far more boring than that. One Troy-Bilt push mower scored 64 out of 100 in Consumer Reports testing, sitting mid-pack in essentially every category. Hold both of those in your head at once because that gap is the real story. Complaint sites collect angry people. They're self-selected and they skew dark. Lab tests measure a new machine on a test lawn and cannot tell you what year 4 looks like. Neither number is the truth by itself. What I can tell you from the bench is that a mid-tier machine that tests fine and fails early is almost always failing at one specific component that was specified 2 grades too light for the job, and on this tier that component is usually the self-propelled drive. Which brings up the part nobody warns you about, and it's the reason this brand tier turns into scrap while the engine is still perfectly good. 3. Front-wheel drive self-propelled mowers on a plastic drive. The engine on a cheap self-propelled mower will usually outlive the thing that makes it walk. On the value tiers, the drive gears are polymer. The axle rides in a molded bushing, and the whole gearbox is listed in the parts book as a transmission assembly. When it strips, and it strips, because you loaded the driven wheels by pushing down on the handle to turn, like every human being does, you're pricing an assembly plus labor against a new mower. Self-propelled repairs run roughly $100 to $300 because of the drive system, and shops themselves will tell you the math. Engine and transmission repairs are seldom worth it on a low-end push mower, unless you're doing the work yourself. Buy the push version and save $200, or buy rear-wheel drive from a tier where the gearbox is sold as gears. That's the whole item. Some of them don't need 1,000 words. 4. The marketplace no-names. This is the flagged one, and it's the most disposable product category in the entire yard equipment aisle. You know the listings. A wall of nearly identical red or black mowers, with names assembled out of 2 English words. 22-inch decks. 3-in-1. 4.3 stars. $216 with free delivery tomorrow. One of the bigger names in that space is PowerSmart. And I want to be precise about why I put it here. Because the mowers are not always terrible when they arrive. That isn't the failure mode. The failure mode is what happens the first time you need one part. Here's the record. On a consumer complaint site, PowerSmart's customer service is rated 1.2 out of 5. And the site's own call statistics say about 24% of customers manage to reach a real person, with an average hold time over 30 minutes. The complaints themselves are all the same shape. A 2-year warranty that goes unanswered for over a month, and a snapped lower handle tube where the replacement part was quoted at 1 to 2 months. On the engine side, when a buyer asked whether parts were available locally or only online, one answer was flatly that it's a Chinese company. Parts are not available, and here's the actual engine manufacturer's site. Now put that against the thing you're really buying. A mower is a wear item pretending to be an appliance. Over 10 seasons you will need, at absolute minimum, blades, a spark plug, an air filter, a starter rope, a set of wheels or bushings, and eventually a carburetor. On a mainstream machine, Every one of those is a 5-minute counter transaction at any small engine shop in the country. On a marketplace no name, the day the company stops importing that model, and these models turn over annually, the machine becomes a sealed unit with grass stains on it. And I want to be fair about something, because it's the strongest argument on the other side. If your yard is a quarter of a suburban lot and you mow it 30 times a year, a $200 mower that dies in 5 years cost you $40 a season, and you are not wrong to have bought it. That's a real position, and I've heard it from smart people. My answer is just this. The same money buys a mainstream machine on sale, and that machine has a 50-year parts pipeline behind it. You didn't save. You just prepaid for the disposal. Watch what happens when I stack these 4 up, because a pattern falls out that changes what you're shopping for. Notice that not one of these 4 failed because of bad engineering in the sense of somebody making a mistake. The deck steel, the nylon gear, the missing drain plug, the vanishing parts pipeline. All of that is exactly to spec. It's cost engineering, executed well, which means you cannot shop your way out of this by trusting a logo, and you can't shop your way out by reading star ratings on a brand new product either. You have to shop the components. And from here on, the list gets more specific and more expensive, because now we're moving into machines where the cheap part is buried and you can't see it at all. Item 9, that $1,000 plus contradiction is still coming. 5. The bargain basement battery mowers. Battery mowers as a category are genuinely good now. That's not the problem. The problem is the bottom rung, where the deck is narrow, the motor is brushed, and the pack is the smallest one the company sells. Consumer Reports surveyed its members about nearly 43,000 walk-behind mowers bought between 2015 and 2025, and their predicted reliability scores span from a perfect 100 down to 14. 14. Same aisle, same season, same shelf height. The lowest rated walk-behind in their whole test set was a 14-inch battery push mower, selling at $299 with 2 batteries and a charger. 2 honest caveats on that. Those reliability figures come from member surveys, which means self-selected respondents who care enough to answer, and the same organization notes that battery-riding mowers have been widely available for only a few years, so they don't yet publish reliability ratings for that group at all. Nobody, not them, not me, has a clean bench-tested mean time to failure by brand. Anyone who tells you they do is selling something. You're most of the way through the list now, and the next 4 items are where the real money burns. If you want more of this kind of thing, subscribing is the whole ask, because item 6 is the one that catches careful buyers. The people who did their homework, bought quality, and got orphaned anyway. 6. Any mower whose battery platform can be discontinued. This is the one I get asked about most, and it has nothing to do with build quality. When you buy a cordless mower, you're not buying a mower, you're buying a socket. And sockets get abandoned. It has already happened at the top of the market. DeWalt discontinued its 40 VMAX line of cordless outdoor power tools in mid-2019, having sold plenty of them to people who assumed a name that big meant permanence. Here's the mechanism, and it decides whether your mower is a 10-year machine or a 5-year one. Lithium packs die 2 ways. They cycle age, which is your fault and slow, and they calendar age, which is nobody's fault and unstoppable. The cells lose capacity sitting in the garage whether you mow or not, faster when they sit hot and full. So every cordless mower has a second purchase built into it somewhere around year 5 to 8. In the survey data, 11% of battery push mower owners reported that their battery life had declined over time, the most commonly reported problem in that category. That's not a defect. That's chemistry, arriving on schedule. The question is what that second purchase costs you when it lands. If the platform is alive and popular, a pack is a shelf item, and there's a third-party market underneath it. Aftermarket 80-volt packs for the big box platforms run somewhere around $68 to $75 for a 3 amp-hour replacement, and rebuild services run about $123 for the mid-size ones. If the platform is dead, none of that exists. And your $500 mower is waiting on somebody's eBay listing. So the rule is simple, and it has nothing to do with mower quality. Buy into the platform with the most tools in it, and the deepest aftermarket, not the one with the best mower. You're marrying the battery, not the deck. And the machine bolted to that battery has its own way of going wrong, which we found out in the worst possible way a couple of seasons back. 7. The mowers where the cost down landed on an electrical connection. In February 2025, the Safety Commission announced a recall of 40-volt, brushless, 21-inch cordless walk-behind mowers because a push-on connector inside the power head could overheat, creating a fire hazard, and the hazard presented while the mower was running. Roughly 200,000 units. I want to be fair here because a recall is not proof that a brand is garbage. It's often proof that the reporting system worked. That company replaced the mowers. And recalls hit the premium end too. In early 2025, about 39,000 John Deere zero-turn mowers with Kawasaki engines were recalled because a voltage regulator inside the engine could fail in use or in storage, causing overheating on machines that sold through dealers from 2018 through 2024 for between $8,000 and $11,500. What interests me is the physics of it, because it tells you where corners get cut on electric machines. A push-on connector is a crimp and a friction fit, and it's used instead of a bolted lug or a soldered joint because it's fast on the line and costs pennies. A high-current joint with a little contact resistance gets warm. Warm oxidizes the contact. Oxidized contact means more resistance, and that loop runs away. That's the electric mower equivalent of a nylon drive gear, a part chosen for assembly speed that becomes the life-limiting component. On a gas mower, the same class of decision shows up as a stamped aluminum push rod that bends when the cooling fins pack with debris. I've seen exactly that failure documented. A standard aluminum exhaust push rod that broke after the engine overheated from dirt buildup, taking the valve guide with it. Safety note, and it's short. If a cordless mower ever smells hot, gets warm around the motor housing after a cut, or trips its own protection, stop and check the recall list by model and serial before you use it again. Nothing about that gets better with more mowing. 8. Lead-acid battery mowers. Still sold, still a mistake. Short one. Some budget electric mowers are still built around sealed lead-acid packs, and reviewers have flagged that brand family for exactly this. Low customer satisfaction driven mainly by lead-acid batteries that are far less reliable and less powerful than lithium. The reason is voltage sag. Lead-acid gives up a third of its usable capacity if you draw it hard, which is precisely what tall grass does. You get a bogged blade, a short run time, and a pack that sulfates if it sits discharged over winter. Whole category. One sentence. Don't. 9. The $1,800 lawn tractor with a transaxle nobody will service. This is the one I flagged, and it's the biggest money in the video. On a huge share of residential lawn tractors in the $1,600 to $2,400 range, across several badges, because the transaxle supplier sells to everybody. The hydrostatic drive is a light-duty sealed unit. No drain plug, no dipstick. Nothing in the owner's manual telling you to touch it. What's inside is a hydrostatic pump and motor sharing a case with a gear reduction, all running in about 2.5 quarts of oil. And this is the part that gets people, a fine internal filter that the maker's own literature says should never require changing. Heat is the enemy. The manufacturer's own technical answer is that loss of power is common once oil temperature rises above roughly 195 degrees, because as the oil thins, internal leakage increases, and the unit can't transmit as much power. So the failure mode is not a bang. It's a slow whine, then a mower that won't climb the hill it climbed last year, then reverse going first. Now the arithmetic, which is where the disposability stops being abstract. A service kit runs in the neighborhood of $361, where a complete new transaxle assembly sells for around $780. And if you're paying somebody else for the labor, you're into it for $1,200 and up, on a machine that's sold new for less than a fully loaded truck payment. Meanwhile, people who did open them up report ordinary results. One owner changed the oil at 500 to 85 hours on a unit that had probably never been serviced and had developed a loud whine, and heavier synthetic quieted it substantially. Others get lucky and coast. One 2008 machine went 1,076 hours and 15 years on the original fill before it started slipping in reverse, with the oil almost black. So which is it? Sealed for life, or an oil change you were never told about? That's the turn, and it's the most useful 5 minutes in this video. Before that, one more badge, because the same disease shows up at 4 times the price. 10. Residential zero turns. The residential zero turn is the fastest growing category in the yard, and the one where the gap between price and content is widest. In the survey data behind the published rankings, Husqvarna carries the lowest predicted reliability rating of the zero-turn brands. And yet the same brand appears on lists of the most reliable push mowers ever built. And one of its residential zero-turns sells at $5,499, with a 3.8-star average across 37 reviews. I'm telling you both halves on purpose. A brand is not a quality, it's a catalog. The company that builds a good walk-behind can absolutely be shipping a residential rider whose spindles, deck gauge, and transaxle were chosen to hit a shelf price against a competitor. The component to interrogate on a zero-turn is the same one as item 9, one size up. Are those integrated hydrostatic units, or a real pump and motor setup with a filter and a serviceable reservoir? The answer decides whether you own a machine for 15 years or rent one for $5 at $900 a year. Now, here's the sentence that costs you the most money in this entire subject, and it's 4 words long. Maintenance free. Sealed for life. And my favorite, printed in the retail copy for a mainstream walk-behind mower. Word for word, hassle-free maintenance. No oil changes for the life of the engine, ever. Just top it off. Read that again and ask the only question that matters. Whose life? Because that sentence is not a claim about lubrication. It's a claim about a duration, and the duration is never stated. And the machine itself tells you what number they had in mind, if you know where to look. Federal rules require the emissions label on a small engine to state, in plain capital letters, an emission compliance period in hours. And for the class of engines used in walk-behind mowers, the certified categories are 125, 250, and 500 hours, with a 1,000-hour category available for the larger displacements. And the agency's own industry data notes that while non-handheld engines certified to 500 or 1,000 hours make up about 45% of engine families, they account for only 22% of actual production. Let me be straight about what that number is and isn't, because this is where sloppy versions of this argument fall apart. That figure is a durability period for emissions compliance. It is not a warranty, and it is not a promise that the engine dies on the hour. But it is the one number on the machine where the manufacturer had to put its money behind a duration. And no engineer alive specifies internals for materially longer than the number they certified to. When 2/3 of production sits in the bottom categories, that's not a rumor about planned obsolescence. That's a filing. So run the arithmetic on your own lawn. 45 minutes a week, 30 weeks a year, is about 22 hours a season. Against 125 hours certification, that's 5 or 6 seasons. Against 500 hours, it's 20. Same aisle. Same looking mower. Sometimes an $80 difference in price. And if you're mowing 4 hours a week on a big lot or cutting 2 rentals, you'll burn a 125-hour tier in a season and a half, which is exactly why the same machine is bulletproof for your neighbor and garbage for you. Then the maintenance sentence lands on top of it. Never change the oil. Don't service the transaxle. It's sealed. And here's what makes it not just optimistic, but indefensible. On that light-duty transaxle, the maker's own frequently asked questions page says fluid changes are typically not recommended, but if the customer insists, it should be done at 50 hours for break-in and then every 250 hours. And their published guidance explains the reasoning out loud. Oil changing may not be emphasized because most homeowners aren't equipped or in the habit of changing transaxle oil. And for most residential cases, the transaxle will outlast the life of the machine. However, changing the oil in your sealed transaxle will extend the life of the unit and greatly improve performance. There it is, in their words, on their site. The fluid change extends the life. They just don't expect you to be the kind of person who'd do one. So the interval exists, and it was kept out of your manual, and the part it protects was assembled without a drain plug, so that doing it means dropping the unit out of the machine. You weren't told your mower needs an oil change every 250 hours. You were told it was sealed. And nobody has ever explained to me why a 15-cent plug and one line in the manual were the two things that couldn't fit, and I'm not going to invent a reason. I only know what the omission is worth, and it's worth the $1,200 on the other end. Notice what actually happened to you there. Nobody lied about a spec. Nobody forged a number. Somebody chose a word, sealed. That means you can't, while sounding like you don't have to, and let you fill in the rest. That's the whole trick, and once you can hear it, you'll hear it everywhere. Lifetime, permanent, self-cleaning, no maintenance required, professional grade. Every one of those is a claim with the duration surgically removed. And you now know exactly which question puts it back, for how long, and says who, in writing. Which brings me to the part of this I actually care about, more than any brand ranking. A machine you can open is a machine you can keep. That's not nostalgia, and it's not about being handy. It's about who gets to decide when something's over. A drain plug is 4 cents of aluminum, and it moves that decision from a marketing department to you. The old iron bore engines weren't better because the metal was magic. They were better because the people who designed them assumed the thing would be taken apart by somebody like you, and they left room for it. Clearance for a wrench, a gasket you can buy, a number in the manual. We didn't lose that because engineering got worse. Engineering got extraordinary. A modern overhead valve mower engine starts on the first pull at 40 degrees and burns a fraction of the fuel its grandfather did. What we lost is the assumption that the owner would ever be trusted with it. And the strange thing is how cheap it would be to give back. Just leave the plug, print the interval, and sell the gear separately from the gearbox. All right, here's the whole thing as a procedure you can actually run in order in the store. 1. Find the emissions label on the engine and read the compliance period in hours. Take a picture of it. That is your first honest data point about how the engine was specified, and it costs nothing. 2. Do your own hours per season number. Minutes per cut times cuts per year divided by 60. And divide it into that label figure. If the answer is fewer than 8 seasons, either move up a tier or accept out loud that you're renting. 3. Pull up the parts diagram on your phone before you leave the aisle. Look for 3 things sold as individual parts: the front wheels or their bushings, the self-propelled drive gears, and the transaxle internals. If any of those only exists as an assembly, that assembly's price is the real end of life of the machine. 4. Physically look for the drain plugs, engine oil, transaxle, and a fuel shutoff valve. Their presence tells you what the designer expected you to do. 5. Read the warranty page for duration words with no duration. Sealed, lifetime, life of the engine, maintenance free. Every one you find, ask the how long question and write down the answer you don't get. 6. Count the shops within 30 miles that will accept that badge for warranty work. If the honest answer is you ship it back, that's a disposable product regardless of how it's built. And when something does break, use the repair rule the trade actually uses. Shops generally say replace the mower when the repair will run more than 50 to 80% of replacement cost, or the machine is past about half its expected life. I use the conservative end, 50%, and I add the hours test. If the machine has burned less than half its label hours, and the fix is under half the price of new, fix it. Above both, walk. On labor, budget honestly. Published rates vary a lot by source, from around $40 to $90 for a repair nationally to $55 to $135 an hour, plus a shop minimum. Take the higher figure when you're deciding. If it's still worth fixing at the pessimistic number, it's worth fixing. Do that, and here's what you get. Not a triumph. Just a bill that doesn't arrive. Year 3, when the neighbor is loading a 2-year-old mower into a truck bed, with the handle snapped and a gearbox full of nylon shavings, you'll be changing $40 worth of oil and a blade. And the check you don't write is the whole reward. Now I want to hear the confession. Not the win, the mistake. What did you buy that you regret? What did it cost? And how long did it last before it let you down? Be specific. Badge, price, and the season it died. I read those, and there is a category of expensive mistake I only learn about because somebody types it out for a stranger. And if you're one of the small engine guys who has 15 of these on the floor of your shop this week and I got something wrong, come tell me, say which part, and bring the model number, because you've got hands on more of them than I do, and I'd rather be corrected than comfortable. There's a thread here I deliberately didn't pull, and it's bugging me. The engine's now sold with no oil change ever. Just top it off. I keep opening those up at high hours and finding what's in there. And I don't have a clean answer yet about what's actually happening to the additive package on a machine that's only ever been topped off. I'm still working on it. Same with why one transaxle maker's public answers and its own service manual can't agree on an interval. I've asked, and I'll tell you if I ever get a straight reply. If that's the kind of thing you want in your feed, subscribe and you'll get it when I've got it nailed down. Until then, read the label, find the plug, and buy the machine that lets you keep it. Take care of your equipment, and it'll take care of your Saturday.